Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you.
Hi, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Tom Dillon. Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I am exceedingly well.
You were trying to think of a new adjective, weren't you?
Marvellous came to my mind, but we've spoken about me saying marvellous before. So
Yes. But you're good.
Better of it. I'm very, very well. And
Good.
are you good? I remember being at a tango night once and someone asking me how I was, and I said, yeah, I'm good. And she said, it's such an Americanism, isn't it? I said, what? She said, I'm good. I said, is it? I have no idea. I thought it was what a strange, just that exchange of how are you? I'm well, or I'm good. And yeah.
And that's what she came out with. Okay.
That's the tango world for you.
It's a strange world. It's a strange world. So, Tom, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about pricing, and specifically the pricing of coaching.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. So it's something we get asked about a lot as we come to the end of our coaching training program. People ask, well, how much should I be charging for my coaching? And we have some ideas, and we thought it would be useful to share those with everyone.
Absolutely.
So what are your thoughts, Helen, on pricing?
Pricing is one of those more nebulous topics in terms of what's already out there in the marketplace. So there is a real broad range of pricing for coaching. So it's one of those questions that is quite hard to answer in terms of what's normal. It's also quite hard because people don't often put their prices on their websites. So you can't go out and do a bit of research online and see what everyone's charging. So it can be tricky for new coaches. So that's the first thing I want to say.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Just charge something.
Yes.
Can't mind. Whatever you do, charge something. And again, it's difficult because people coming out of a training program have to complete some practice hours in order to gain their qualification.
Yes.
So those tend to be offered free. Put them out there to all. Invite people to come and get some free coaching. And I think that's great. That's a good way to start. But I think from the point that you're qualified, there has to be some charge made or some exchange of services or a gift of some description, some way of recompensing you for your time.
Yes. I was talking to someone the other day who said she's charging £5 a session to get her into the groove of charging something. And I thought that was really interesting, bearing in mind the minimum wage. And I think no one could argue with you if you said, I'm just starting out, I'm going to charge you minimum wage so that I get minimum wage for the hour that I spend with you. I don't think anyone would argue with that.
No.
So I just thought it was really interesting that she chose £5 as opposed to, what is it, 11 or something?
I don't know. It's not the minimum wage anymore, isn't it? What's it called now?
It's called the living wage.
The living wage,
Yeah.
yes.
They
I
nicked
think
it off
that's fair enough. The living wage is a good
Yeah, they nicked the concept off the living wage movement, didn't they?
Yes.
Which is something slightly different.
Yeah, so and I think we're not advocating you just charging the living wage.
No.
But it's a way of getting you out of the headset of giving away free coaching.
Yes.
The headset. That's a strange thing. I meant mindset.
Do you want to record that bit again?
No, let's leave it in.
I was looking at you thinking, headset?
The headset. Yeah, it didn't sound right, did it? The mindset of, giving away free stuff.
Absolutely. Because I think for our doctors listening, what's really interesting is they're not only getting to the end of their course and thinking, oh, how do I move from free to paid for? They're getting their head around the idea of actually charging people because what they offer in the world is not charged for at the point of contact with patients. So, and I think this is a problem with anyone in the public sector. They have to move in their mind from being available for free, effectively, in a GP surgery, for example, into this is how much I'm going to charge. And get their head around that can be quite difficult.
Yes, I think so. And even if they're providing other services that are not patient-directed, So if they are an appraiser, a trainer, a mentor, they're probably being paid by an organisation rather than the individual. So they may well have to submit timesheets or some way of acknowledging that they've done the work, but they're probably not submitting an invoice to an individual. And I think that's a big barrier again, that people have to get their head around. I'm going to send this invoice out.
Yeah.
I'm going to charge someone for what I'm doing.
And they're not having those conversations
No.
around, this is how much I charge,
Yeah.
and
that can be
selling
big.
themselves. Yeah.
No, it's not a barrier, but it is something that people have to get their head around, isn't it? And just, okay, I'm going to have that conversation. I'm going to brace myself and have the conversation.
Yes.
And hope someone on the other end of the conversation says, oh, yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I thought it would be much more. And then, oh!
Should have charged more.
Yeah.
So mindset, experience, etc. aside, there are a couple of things to consider when it comes to pricing. And the first thing I think that's really important to consider is, what are your costs? Because you will have some costs in running your coaching business that you are going to have to pay for whether you are doing any coaching or not. So I don't advocate setting up your business as a coach, whether it's a side hustle or whatever it looks like, with lots and lots of expenses. I think you can start at really, really low cost. But the first thing to consider is you're going to be paying for insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're going to have professional indemnity insurance. Yeah.
So even if you start your business on a shoestring, that's going to be a cost. So you've got to think about, what are my costs going to be for the year? And other costs, people always go, oh, I need a website. So there will be some cost involved with that. So I think step one, if you're thinking, how much do I charge? Let's rewind a bit and go, okay, how much is my business going to cost me to run, whether I do any coaching or not? How much it's going to cost me to be a coach?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the first thing.
No, and I think that is a good place to start, isn't it? Because people don't tend to think of the costs relating to what comes in from the client. They're just, well, that's just the cost of running a business. But you've got to build that into your pricing somewhere along the line. I did have one chap that used to come to one of my co-coaching groups, and he'd taken on a charity client very early on in his coaching as a practice client. So he was the head of a charity, and could never bring himself to say, I'm now going to charge you. He just carried on doing free stuff because he couldn't have that conversation.
Oh, that's difficult, isn't it?
And again, if he just had the conversation to say, I'm going to charge you something because I have costs,
Yes.
that would be great, but he just didn't.
And that comes down to contracting, which we've talked so much about before. And I think that's really key when you have practice clients. And we do tell all of our students this, don't we? Really contract around how many sessions are you going to offer for free.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they can't become paid for clients later. In fact, they are probably a nice transition to moving from free to paid for, but do that contracting piece.
Yeah, and it's possible at the beginning to say the first 3 sessions are going to be free. After that, I will be charging you if you want to continue, and we'll talk about that as we come towards the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's fair to think, what are my costs going to be? I think something else to consider is how often and how many hours have I got available for me to do coaching?
Yeah.
What's my availability?
So a lot of the doctors that come through our training program have no intention of coaching full time. They just want to have a portfolio career where maybe coaching is 1 day a week for them.
Yes.
So that might be a Friday is when they do their coaching, which is absolutely fine, but it's recognising that that's the time that you have available. And probably all of your coaching activity is going to fit into that 1 day. So not just seeing clients, but all of the preparation work and invoicing and things like that. Everything is probably going to fit into that 1 day that you've allocated, because you're busy on other days doing other parts of your portfolio. So again, being realistic about how much coaching you can actually squeeze into your life and how much then you want to charge, because that's all the time you have.
Yes. I was talking to someone this week on one of our courses, and they said, oh my goodness, doesn't it take a lot of energy to listen?
Yeah, it does.
And I think that's a really good point, because it could be that scenario you've just described, that that coach that only coaches on a Friday, and that's when they do all of their work, maybe only has 1 hour a week to actually engage with a client, which is absolutely fine, but you've got to factor that into your pricing. So whatever your business is going to cost you to run for a year has to be covered by that 1 hour a week. So that's 52 hours a year, but you're not going to be coaching every week. So maybe it's 48 hours a year or 45 hours a year. So you've got to think, what realistically am I going to do in a year?
Yeah, so if we've got 45 hours and it's only one session every week, then you have to give some thought to how much you want to charge to cover your costs.
Yeah. And then obviously, if you are looking for it to contribute to your income, you're going to want to add in more than just your costs. So you need to factor that in, any taxes that you have to pay, national insurance that you have to pay, that kind of thing. So you build it up with how much it's going to cost you to run your business, how much you'd like to earn from it, and how much time you have available. And once you've kind of got that right in your head, you might come up with a figure that you either think, oh gosh, that's cheap, or you might think, oh gosh, that's expensive. And I think you then have to consider the marketplace and consider the way you feel about offering that to people and get your head around that bit. So there was an article that I read that someone had produced where they'd done lots of research on both private kind of life coaching, if you like, non-executive coaching and executive coaching. And they found that coaching prices ranged from 50 to, I think it's £550 an hour in the UK.
Yeah, and I think top end, I think some organisations will charge more. So I remember when I was doing my Masters in Coaching, lady on there did some banking coaching for bankers.
Yes.
And they were charging around something like £2,000 a session, which is crazy money.
Yeah.
And, you know, the difference between her coaching and anyone else's coaching, I would suggest there wasn't a great deal of difference.
No.
With all due respect to the lady concerned, she wasn't doing anything spectacular. You know, she was on a coaching, what was essentially, it was a master's program, but it was a training program along with the rest of us, and there was really no difference in her coaching from ours. So that was just an organisational thing.
And there would have been someone else on that very same course that may have just been saying, oh, I don't know even if I can charge £50 for a session.
Definitely.
So some of it's all where you're situated in the marketplace, and some of it is most definitely mindset around this. So you've got to find a balance, haven't you?
Yeah, there's definitely that. You've got to be pragmatic about it, haven't you? And if you think, well, my rate is £600 a session, and people are going, no, that's too expensive. I'm not. If you can't find anyone willing to pay you £600 a session, then you've got to rethink it.
Yes, absolutely. So you've got to think, who am I aiming my coaching at, and what are they prepared to pay for coaching? And I think it's also quite interesting to consider, what am I prepared to pay for coaching? I think that's quite an interesting question, because when we're training in coaching, we're very privileged that we have access to free coaching because we all practice on each other. But if we were going to go out into the marketplace and find ourselves a coach, knowing the power of coaching, how much would you be prepared to pay for that? And that will help inform how much you're prepared to charge for it.
Yeah, I at the moment, I have supervision, which is, for me, a form of coaching. That's the approach my supervisor takes. And he charges me £250 a session. And that's something I've been doing for the last 5 years. So that's obviously something I'm prepared to pay for.
Yeah.
It's slightly different because it's supervision, but it's... I just remember being at a conference and a supervisor saying, well, I charge people 10% more than they charge as a coach, because supervision is, I've done a bit more training, which is quite a nice way to think about it. But interestingly, when I started to say that to people as a supervisor, well, I'll charge you 10% more than you charge, a few coaches went, oh, that much. It's almost as though they weren't expecting to pay that much for supervision, which is strange. So yes, I think that's a good rule of thumb. How much would you be prepared to charge, to pay a coach. Yeah.
Well, I think then when you are saying to someone, this is how much I charge, you come from a place of authenticity.
Yes. Yeah. So I did some work with a head teacher not so long ago. And in terms of that, thinking about pricing, I'd had a head teacher on one of my courses and asked her how much she charged. She was paying for, I knew she was having some coaching, and asked her how much she paid for her coaching. And she said £600 a session. And I thought, oh, that's why schools don't have any money. That's a lot of money. So I thought, okay. So when I was having the conversation with my head teacher about pricing, I thought, well, I'm not going to charge that. That doesn't feel authentic to me. So he's a head teacher. So I said, it's £300 a session. He said, oh, that's far more than I thought I was going to have to pay.
Oh,
I said,
dear.
okay, so how much were you thinking you were going to pay? He said, about £100. I said, okay, let's meet in the middle. Let's call it 200. I wanted to work with him. Now, again, I think you have to be pragmatic. I could have said, no, my fees are 300. If you can't pay that, then we're not going to work together, which that could be the stance you take, but you might end up going hungry. So he was a nice guy. We'd had that chemistry session. I wanted to work with him. So, and £200 a session seemed quite reasonable. I think we were both happy with that.
Yeah. I think the thing that people often forget is that one session on a Friday has effectively got to pay for all of that Friday's work for you. If that's your allocated time for coaching, it's not just the hour, is it?
No. I'd be surprised if someone did say, well, it's just going to be 1 hour. I would imagine people will get 2 or 3 sessions.
Yeah.
That's normally you would schedule potentially 3 sessions in a day.
Yeah. But everyone's unique.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to what time you have available and being realistic about that. And if it is only 1 session a week, then pricing around that. But recognising that if you say, well, that one session a week, I need £1,000 for that someone's probably not going to pay that.
Yeah. So
a bit of testing of the market and probably being braver than you want to be to start with, because you can always ski downhill. That me going in at 300 and him saying, well, I only paid my last one 100. I could ski downhill, couldn't I?
Yeah.
I mean, probably my negotiation skills needed a bit of honing. I could have gone to 280.
You're sounding like you're on The Apprentice now.
Come on. Yeah. I could have, but that felt like meeting in the middle felt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's probably against all negotiation tactics, meeting in the middle. But for me, it
worked.
Right. And he was happy. We had a good working relationship. So, yeah.
Do you want to hear about what I did when I first started coaching?
Tell me, what did you do when you first started coaching?
Well, I had a comfort price. I had a price where I knew I felt really comfortable saying, this is how much I charge. And then I kind of had a stretch price. And I thought, that's where I want to get to. I want to get comfortable getting to that point. And I had an idea of what was my lowest price. What's my red line price? So if there was someone I really wanted to work with, if they didn't have much money, if, there was some reason why they weren't going to pay my comfort price, I had a red line price that I wouldn't go below. And I think that's important for you to have. But then I worked on building up to my stretch price and getting to that point. So I think if you're new to coaching and you have sort of a range of prices, have your baseline, where you're comfortable, and something to aspire to charging, and you can work towards that.
Yeah. I think doctors have a slight advantage because they have the word doctor in front of their name and are seen already as professionals and people to be respected. So in some senses, they can command more money because they're a doctor.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, so I think it comes back to bravery. They have to be brave in saying what they would like to have, what they would like to be paid for their coaching, and then seeing how that lands.
And once they start to charge and earn money from coaching, then their confidence will increase with that as well.
Yeah, I think there's normally a progression, isn't there, from someone saying, right, well, I'm going to just charge £50 and see how it goes. Once they start charging £50, they go, oh, I'm worth more than that.
Yes.
And then they start to naturally push their prices up over time. So
Yeah.
till they find that level that they're comfortable being paid that and think, well, okay, that's feels like I'm worth that much money, and they're happy to pay it, so that's fine.
I think the joy of coaching would quickly go out the window if you were coaching at a level where you felt taken advantage of, that the power of coaching wasn't being appreciated in the recompense you were having. So I think keep an eye on your pricing. Don't think about keeping it the same forever.
So I think a fair balance of exchange.
Yes.
I think that's a lovely phrase. I quite often think about that, the balance of exchange. And I think for a lot of doctors, if they stop to think about how many hours they do that they don't get paid for within the NHS, the balance of exchange isn't very fair. At least with coaching, if you spend an hour and a half with someone, you get paid for the hour and a half.
Yes.
And maybe that's a good lesson as well, that if you are charging an hour and a half, so let's say £100 for an hour and a half, what are you going to be doing above and beyond that that's not getting paid for? So be very clear about, in your contracting, about what service you are providing and what you're going to be doing in between sessions, if anything, and how does that get paid for?
Yes.
Good.
Lots to think about there.
Yes, thank you. Enjoyed that.
Good.
Hopefully that's given everyone a little bit of a steer on where they might be with their pricing and where they might be heading towards with their pricing. But I think the message I want to leave people with is be brave and pragmatic. Brave first and then pragmatic.
I think that's a good message. Absolutely. Next time, we are going to be talking about another coaching approach.
Excellent. Which coaching approach are we going to be talking about?
We're going to be dabbling in the world of time to think.
Okay, lovely. So this is Nancy Klein's approach to coaching, which I think it's worth our listeners finding out a little bit more about. So
absolutely.
I look forward to that, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Me too. Bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.